Annemarie Campbell was an aspiring artist. She had graduated from Murray State University in Kentucky, gaining a degree in printmaking. But the 23-year-old had grown up in Florida. She often returned to the Sunshine State, drawn back to its beauty and fond childhood memories. Only recently had she moved to Tennessee, where she had secured work in a vintage clothing store. But her real passion was abstract drawings, portraits, and creating fake food from objects that she found lying around. She used her artistic talent to better the lives of others. When she was at university, she auctioned off her work to support Hurricane Katrina victims. In May 2006, Annemarie was back in Florida, visiting her favorite childhood spots with her friends, her stepfather Mark Barrett, and his new partner, Jackie. They had a cabin on Juniper Creek near Sweetwater Springs at Florida's Ocala National Forest. It was a beautiful, secluded spot, a place that she frequented as a child. The cabin was a rustic property overlooking the water. It was full of memories for the family. The Juniper Run is considered one of the best runs to canoe or kayak in the whole of America. The narrow, winding waterway runs from the Juniper Springs for several miles until it empties out in St. Johns River at Lake George. The picturesque route is a favorite for visitors to Florida. It is set under a dense canopy of old-growth forest. The water is calm and crystal clear. Otters frequent the area, and it is considered a peaceful and tranquil journey by many. Annemarie and the rest of the group paddled in the shallow water of the creek. They splashed about, paddling in kayaks and swimming in the clear waters. Annemarie and Jackie headed to a sandbar and sat down, soaking up the sun's rays. Others in the group, including Mark, carried on, meandering down the waterway. After sunning themselves for a little while, Annemarie decided to continue downstream and catch up with Mark and his friend. But instead of joining Jackie in the kayak, she decided to snorkel the rest of the way back to the cabin. The river was only 10 feet wide and just a few feet deep. She pulled her mask and snorkel down over her face and stepped off the sandbar into the water. The water was so clear she could see all around her. The roots from trees spread down from the riverbank into the water. Vegetation swayed with the current along the riverbed, and fish swam in the deeper, more sheltered pool. Annemarie floated on the surface, being carried along by the gentle current. But what she didn't know was that she was being dragged closer to an alligator. It was large, 11 feet 4 inches long, and weighing 407 pounds. It was a male, and it was mating season, a time when alligators are known to be naturally more aggressive than other times of the year. The two men had kayaked past it without even noticing it only moments before. It had watched them from the edge of the river, secluded by the overhanging vegetation and dark reflections of low-lying branches. The size of the kayak was enough to deter it from approaching them, but a lone swimmer, on the other hand, was a much easier target. Perhaps Annemarie startled the alligator as she crept along, silently hovering at the surface of the river, or maybe the alligator was in hunting mode. Nobody knows for sure. But as she approached the animal, blissfully unaware of the imminent danger she was in, it suddenly lunged at her. It closed its massive jaws around her head and the upper part of her body. The force from the bite alone cracked her ribs, squeezing the air from her lungs. She felt the immense pressure closing in all around her as her world went dark. She was pulled under the water, fighting to stay alive, fighting for air. At first, she didn't know what was going on. It had all happened so quickly, and she hadn't had time to react or take a deep breath and brace herself for the attack. The hit alone had shaken her, and now she was held firmly in its jaws with no way out. She tried to gain purchase on the animal's enormous snout, desperately trying to pry open its jaws, but the alligator held fast, swimming downstream with the young woman firmly in its grasp. She could feel herself growing weaker as her lungs were screaming out for air. She knew the end was near. When Jackie climbed back into the kayak and paddled downstream, she was concerned not to see Annemarie anywhere. She called out to her, but with so many twists and turns in the narrow riverway, she felt sure she would see her around the next corner, and to her horror, saw a commotion unfolding just yards away. The alligator had swum down the river, still clutching Annemarie in its jaws, when Mark and his friends spotted it. They were shocked to see the size of it, and then there was the terrifying realization that it had something or someone in its mouth. They instantly knew that it was Annemarie and rushed into the water to save her. They leapt onto the alligator, wrestling with it, holding onto its body, covered in thick, scaly skin. They pulled with all their might at the animal's jaws, trying desperately to open them and free the young woman. But the alligator held them firmly shut. With every second that passed, they knew Annemarie's chances were fading. She was being held under the water by the alligator, and who knew how long she had been like that? Mark punched the alligator over and over, bringing his fists down on the reptile's armored head. But that wasn't working. The alligator refused to let go. Then Mark and his friend went for the alligator's sensitive areas. Mark shoved his hand into the mouth, slicing it open on the razor-sharp teeth. They clawed at its snout and gouged its eye, all the while screaming at it to let go of his stepdaughter. Only when they drove their fingers into its eye did it finally relent and release Annemarie. The two men grabbed her and carried her up the riverbank, but it was too late. Annemarie had been held under the water too long and had tragically drowned. The coroner ruled that Annemarie sadly lost her life from both drowning and blunt force trauma. She had suffered lacerations on her head, neck, and upper torso, and suffered multiple rib fractures. Following the brutal and harrowing attack, officials closed that section of the waterway and set about trying to catch the alligator. They knew that it was large, from the injuries Annemarie had sustained and from what Mark and his friend had described. Within an hour of the attack, trappers and wildlife officials were scrambled to the location. They began to hunt for the killer reptile. It was highly likely that it was still in the area. They set up 8 baited traps in the water, large hooks covered in beef lungs to entice the animal. Its scent drawing the alligator near, but it didn't take the bait for the first few days. Instead, all trappers found was a large imprint on the muddy riverbank where it had rested in the sun. The following day, the trappers spotted it on the sandbar. It saw them approaching in their 14-foot Carolina skiff boat. As they closed in on the animal, a new TV helicopter hovered overhead, the cameraman leaning out of the window to capture the moment. But the noise from the whirring rotor blades scared the alligator, and it scuttled into the water and swam away. Furious that the chopper had interfered with their efforts, they continued searching for the elusive beast. The following morning, the team set out once more just after 8 a.m., and that's when they spotted it. The alligator had finally taken the bait and was now impaled on one of the large hooks, just 400 yards from where Annemarie had been killed. As they pulled the alligator in towards the boat, the hook firmly embedded inside the animal. It took several officers to carry the alligator from the boat to a truck, stopping several times to rest and get a better grip. It was enormous. Sadly, Annemarie didn't stand a chance when she was taken by the animal. It was too strong and powerful, and the sheer weight of it was testament to its incredible power. But officials needed to be sure that it was the correct alligator. The Juniper Run was so popular with visitors that they needed to make sure people were safe. Upon closer examination, it was found that the alligator had one of its eyes badly gouged and multiple lacerations on its snout. Mark was then called in to present the puncture wounds on his hand, and they were a direct match with the alligator's teeth. They were relieved to know that they had captured the alligator responsible for Annemarie's death. But although others could rest easy, knowing that the enormous reptile no longer patrolled these waterways, nothing would bring Annemarie back from her terrifying final affliction.